Back in, Kevin Slaten with you, and we welcome back to the show our good friend from FramingPaterno.com, John Ziegler. John, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Always good to talk to you, Kevin.
Well, it's always good to have another watchdog out there, and boy, have you got some stuff today. I don't know where we'll start. We could start with victim number 9 in the Penn State case, or Steubenville, or Lunenburg. I mean, this Lunenburg story that you sent me is just phenomenally off the charts. But it all comes back to the same thing, John, and that is this grotesquely incompetent media that we deal with in this country today. I don't know what's happened. There is no reporting that's ever done. It's all just too easy and spoon-fed, and they run with it as though it were factual.
You're exactly right. And what is becoming increasingly common is that football, for some reason, is the target of this incompetence and these false narratives. And the three stories that you just referenced all deal with football in situations where football teams and football programs have been, to some extent, destroyed, and kids have been harmed. Football players, innocent football players, have been harmed greatly because of false media narratives. And, let's just take them one by one. Obviously, I've been devoting much of the last 2 years to the Penn State case, and my very firm belief, that Joe Paterno and Penn State had absolutely no culpability in the crimes of Jerry Sandusky. And the latest little wrinkle I find fascinating. I don't know, and you're the lawyer, so I'm curious as to your thoughts. But we were told during all of this that there is no chance that a victim could be lying. That male victims don't lie for money. Even when it's millions of dollars.
Let me stop you for a moment, John. It's my experience in life that all people seem to lie for money.
Yes.
I don't care what they're a victim of. People who aren't victims lie for money.
Well, yeah, and especially when it's several $1 million, and especially when you happen to be someone who comes from a disadvantaged background. And by the way, the media has made it very clear that they will not give you any scrutiny whatsoever.
Yeah.
And this is the proof. I mean, there's a lot of things I'm suspicious about in this whole case with regard to who's telling the truth and who's not and what their motives are. But when you find somebody dead to rights on a lie this blatant as we have on victim number 9, I think it makes you question everything. Because if the lawyers for victim 9 felt so comfortable that they could come up with a story that they did that involves Joe Paterno having lunch with victim number 9 and Jerry Sandusky at Beaver Stadium, this is many years after Jerry Sandusky had already retired. If they felt comfortable, if the lawyers felt comfortable, let's follow the logic and the evolution here. So the lawyers for victim number 9, who was the star post-arrest victim, he has the most horrific allegations in the entire trial. If they felt like, well, Penn State isn't coming forward with enough money, so we're not going to take the settlement. So they don't take the settlement, so they decide to file a lawsuit against Penn State. And in that lawsuit, they concoct this absolutely ridiculous story about their client having lunch with Joe Paterno, meeting with him multiple times, and by the way, even implying that Joe Paterno knew what Sandusky was up to. I mean, if they felt comfortable putting that in a lawsuit and making it public, knowing the media would eat it up, which of course the media did,
right?
The Associated Press did, ESPN.com did, got reported all over the place. For some reason, Scott Paterno and his genius decided not to even respond to that, even though it's an easily provable lie. If they felt comfortable doing that, what does that tell you about what else they feel comfortable lying about? Because they knew they would get no media scrutiny.
Exactly.
And the proof of this is I spent much of the last 2 weeks trying to prove that this was a lie. Now, obviously, the word prove is impossible, especially in this kind of a case. But as you know, I've written an article at FramingPaterno.com where I have 2 letters from Jerry Sandusky, and I talk about my interaction with Dottie Sandusky on this, and I talk about the relationship between Jerry Sandusky and Joe Paterno and how it is that Jerry Sandusky, who is not declarative about anything Kevin. I've told you before that Jerry Sandusky is the kind of guy who, if you asked him what time it was, if he didn't have 3 watches, he wouldn't give you a declarative answer. And that's part of why he screwed up the Bob Costas interview as badly as he did, very famously, obviously. So the reality is that when Jerry declaratively says, not only did I not have lunch with this kid and Joe Paterno, I never had lunch with Joe Paterno, period, after I retired, which, of course, makes perfect sense because they were not close friends. That's one of the biggest myths in this whole deal. I actually felt as if Jerry had disdain, still to this day, for Joe Paterno, and probably vice versa. So when Jerry's that declarative, and when the story makes no sense, it's pretty damn obvious that this is a lie concocted for money. But, of course, no one cares because we've already determined that Jerry Sandusky must be some sort of a pathological liar, which I don't believe that he is, having interviewed him for 3.5 hours in prison and exchanged many letters and emails with him. Almost everything he's ever told me has been corroborated in some way, shape, or form, but I get that people are never going to believe him because he's a convicted pedophile. I understand that, even though, to this day, Kevin, for some reason, 70% of the public believes Lee Harvey Oswald when he said I was just a patsy, even though he killed 2 people, including the President of the United States, and lied numerous times. But okay, that's just the strange world in which we live. The reality is that Victim 9 is lying about this. I believe he's lying about his entire story. I put together that entire case in the article at framingpaterno.com, and I've even put together a 50-minute video, which people can see at framingpaterno.com, about how I think this entire case has been misunderstood in a way that has allowed Penn State and Joe Paterno to be unfairly maligned and essentially convicted without evidence. I think the media blew this case from day one. And I think this is a classic example. This is a microcosm. What we're talking about here, Kevin, I think is a microcosm for how all this went down. Because when you have people who know they will get no scrutiny, and when the media buys into a narrative, they allow whatever those people want, whatever they think is in their self-interest, whatever will get them money, they can say whatever they want, and there is no regulation. There's no guarding. There's no governor, if you will. There's nothing restricting them. They can claim whatever they want because they will only be perceived as heroes, and they will get no scrutiny. And that's, I think, we finally found a situation where someone went too far, and this is a pretty easily and obviously, provable lie.
Yeah, when you take the lie to this extreme, where you're making up luncheons with Joe Paterno and Jerry Sandusky after Sandusky had retired as a coach, I think everybody at Penn State knows this is a lie. And yet, for some reason, quiet, silence. And I don't ever expect the media to actually do reporting or investigation because they don't do that anymore. The media is nothing but a lapdog for anyone who has a story to peddle, and they'll peddle it any way they want to. And the media, if you pick the right media people nationally, they'll then run with it as though it were fact. Never mind investigating what your claim is. We're just going to run with it, especially if it's sensational, especially if it does damage. In this case, apparently, if you're doing damage to a football program somewhere, high school or otherwise, then you're going to be listened to by the media, by the idiots at ESPN.
That's an outstanding point, and you just put it much better than I did. And let me just amplify that just a little bit, because what you just said was really important. Penn State knows this is a lie. But the number one thing people who have not followed this case need to understand, because otherwise you'll never fully grasp what happened here, is that people think, well, Penn State pled guilty essentially for these crimes, right? So that must be true. That
sure.
Paterno must be guilty, and obviously Sandusky is guilty because Penn State, in a logical world, right, would defend themselves. But we're not living in that logical world. Penn State is now in a situation where it's in their incentive, bizarrely, to take credit or to plead guilty for crimes that they had nothing to do with. And even though they know it's a lie, the lawyers of Victim 9 know that that's the perfect button to push to get Penn State to open up their pocketbooks even wider than they're already opened. Because as soon as let me make this clear, Victim 9 has no connection to Penn State. He started meeting Jerry Sandusky in 2005, 6 years after Jerry Sandusky had retired. So he needs a Penn State connection to get him to open up the pocketbook a little bit further. So what does he do? He concocts a story about Joe Paterno, knowing the lawyers know damn right well the media will give them no scrutiny, and Penn State's not going to defend Paterno.
No.
So that's a story that gets media coverage, that puts pressure on them and says to them, look, you better give us more money or we're taking this thing to trial. And it's going to, and of course Penn State has already made it clear, oh, no, we're going to roll over, play dead for anybody. So you just go ahead and push us.
Why do you think Penn State is so quick to accept responsibility in these cases? Have they become what the NCAA accused them of being when they weren't? And that is an institution that's so interested in getting their football program back on track that they'll pay anything to anybody who claims anything just to get it behind them.
I think, Kevin, this is the element of the case that gets into a political realm. Not a political realm as in, who's going to get elected to what office, but political, I mean ideological. And I believe that academia is now the most politically correct and certainly liberal-minded institution in America. And so when you have academic institutions and people who are in academia, I mean, these people have no balls whatsoever. I mean, the balls are dead, countrywide.
Right.
The testicles are in grave danger, the endangered species list. But in academia, they don't even exist. They never existed.
I think we should open up a testicle shop.
Right, exactly. So
we'll become millionaires. Nobody has any.
Right, exactly. So in academia, their first, second, and third reaction is always, "Oh my God, we're wrong. Let's plead guilty. Let's not fight anything. The victims are always right. And please, can we? Yeah, thank you, sir. May I have another? It's all self-flagellation. I mean, that's what Penn State is. They ought to get they ought to give doctorates at Penn State now in self-flagellation, because you would never get a better education in that than at Penn State University, based upon what's happened over the last 2 years. What happens here, of course, Kevin, is when these people go to their cocktail parties, what reaction do they get? They get positive reaction. Oh, you guys have done such a great job handling this very difficult situation. and of course, all they care about is the media. The media goes, oh, you guys, you really understand it now. You get it, and you those horrible people that were there before you, the Joe Paternos of the world, which is real. This is a bizarre world we're now living in. We're the Joe Paternos of the world, are the bad people that we must somehow fix what they did after 61 glorious years, the bastion of all that was supposed to be good in college athletics. It's just Alice in Wonderland like. So to answer your question, I think this has to do with political correctness, gutlessness, and a liberal mentality in academia, and we've seen it in other football-related situations that you've already mentioned.
Yeah, and one, you actually were a guest columnist at the newspaper in Steubenville. This Steubenville rape case that occurred about a year and a half ago, I suppose, and it involved a couple of players on the football team that never played a down in a game, an official game, before the rape, and certainly didn't play after the rape. They were then convicted, and somehow this is a football program problem.
Well, I actually think that the Steubenville story tells people or illustrates how bogus the Penn State story is, because they're directly connected. Because make no mistake, without the Penn State narrative in the media, Steubenville story never becomes a national story. I'm positive of that. And the reason why I know the Steubenville story, I don't think you know this, Kevin, this is a bizarre coincidence, but I actually used to be a TV sportscaster in Steubenville, and I wrote a book about the coach who is still there. This was many years ago, but he and I have kept in contact. I've been kind of advising him throughout this entire controversy. I've gone to Steubenville and actually put him on videotape for the potential purposes of having him do a national television interview, almost kind of like mock interview. So I know more about this case than certainly anybody in the media does.
Which, by the way, isn't saying much.
Right, exactly. That's not saying much. I'll acknowledge that. But the reality is that without Penn State, there is no Steubenville. And so, and both narratives are totally false. Football had absolutely nothing to do with any sort of cover-up in Steubenville. And the most amazing thing, and I know you read the article that I wrote in the Steubenville paper over the weekend, most amazing thing, and this is still continuing to this day, the Huffington Post had an ignorant writer today write a column about, oh my gosh, oh woe is me, the football cover-up culture continues. Is this finally the end of it? And of course I wrote to her, and she had no clue about what the hell she was even talking about. As it turns out, the indictments that came down last week, which got huge national news coverage, had nothing to do with the original case. Nothing.
No, not only did they have nothing to do with it, John, but as you point out in your column, the authorities, when announcing the indictments, referred to the time period prior to the rape taking place. So they obviously had nothing to do with the rape case whatsoever.
No, that's what's amazing. You know, I am someone who believes incompetence rules the world, and I mean, I'm not a conspiracy guy at all because I think human beings are too stupid and incompetent to pull off conspiracies, and that's why I'm not a conspiracy guy in the Penn State case or in almost any case. But here's how I actually thought. Even I, Kevin, thought the media was competent enough to understand that you cannot cover something up that hasn't happened yet. And so when you were accused of a crime in April 2012 and the rape itself occurred in August of 2012, then guess what? You must be referring to something else. But, unfortunately, the Attorney General played right into it in Ohio because he knows what the media wants. He knows politically this is better for him if this has something to do with this nationally known so-called Steubenville rape case. But the reality is we now know, and by the way, I love it, that news outlets are now finally saying, actually after reviewing the indictment, it does appear as if there's a second episode here that we've never heard about before, which, of course, they still never tell you that had nothing to do with football. Nothing.
And not only that, but there was no such thing as a football cover-up at Steubenville. In fact, the head coach of the football team had a lot to do with fingering the guilty parties.
Yeah, and by the way, again, this is so much like the Penn State case for me, Kevin, because I did not go to Penn State, and my rivalry or mutual hatred with Scott Paterno is very well known, so I have no love for the Paterno family. I'm just looking for the truth. Similarly, in Steubenville, the coach there, Reno Sakash, who I know exceedingly well, and as I said, I've tried to help him, he and I have made each other's lives miserable over the years. I mean, we are not buddy-buddy, but I also know him very well. I know what he's capable of, and I know when he's telling me the truth, and I know when he's bull-crapping me, and I'm positive he had nothing to do with it, and the facts show that. He's the guy, as you just alluded to, who brought the football team in and said, give me all your phones in the football locker room. Now, is that a cover-up? Is that a football cover-up when the number one evidence in the case is the phones, and the phones got accumulated at his direction in the football locker room, and oh, by the way, the players who were found to have not properly reported the incident were all suspended right before the playoffs, including 2 starters, and oh, by the way, 2 of the 3 players suspended ended up playing winter sports at Steubenville High School. I mean, this is a football cover-up. I mean, and of course, this is why Reno Sakash, the coach, and none of the other current coaches actually got indicted. But the news, they're so stupid. CBS Evening News, I did a video on this, you can also find it at framingpaterno.com. CBS Evening News actually implied that 2 of the people getting indicted were football coaches, which is false. One was an elementary school wrestling coach, which I believe had to do with the other episode, and the other was a volunteer assistant who's not even on the staff anymore, and his allegations had nothing to do with the rape at all. It had to do with the case of underage drinking beforehand at another location. I mean, but no one, once the narrative is set, and I guarantee this Huffington Post writer I referred to, all she knew was the narrative, right? She's into female rights, which is all fine. So she knows the narrative. No one's questioning the narrative, so it must be true. And so that's how one thing begets the next. And that we've seen it in the Penn State case constantly.
Oh, it was constant in the Penn State case, from people in the Kansas City newspapers to Christine Brennan at USA Today to anyone at ESPN that even weighed in on it. It was the same thing over and over again. Zero reporting done, zero investigating. In fact, as we found out in the Penn State case, zero even taking the time to read the free report.
Well, funny you mention ESPN, because it's a side story that I think you're going to love. So I wrote this article at framingpaterno.com with the Sandusky response, Jerry Sandusky's response to this lie about Victim 9, and I put it out, and just for kicks, I have this email list that I can send to media members across the country, right? It's like 1,600 email lists of people that were chosen based upon the fact that they have something to do with either with Pennsylvania news or sports news or whatever. So I send this out, and of course I know I'm going to get no real response.
Right.
But there were a lot of ESPN emails on there. I got one response today from someone at ESPN. You'll love who it was from. It was from John Walsh, the guy who basically founded the network, who wanted to know whether or not any of his news people had reported on this. I said, John, no. As a matter of fact, not. I'd love to talk to anybody, but I've been very disappointed with your network and their coverage of this story. You guys have gotten it totally wrong. And he responds to me, he says, well, I'm not really in the decision-making mode anymore. I'm not really in charge anymore, but I'd like you to try to talk to somebody. And I said, well, just tell me who to talk to. I'll talk to anybody.
Yeah, who's going to talk to you?
And I haven't heard back from him again. But, how bizarre is it that literally the guy who used to run ESPN, who basically founded the network, is the only one who responds, because the people who are actually in the trenches, they are so blinded on this story. They literally couldn't see the truth if it hit them in the face. They have no idea. And I think it's a mixture of incompetence and self-interest. It's really a perfect storm of all of that. When you get incompetence and self-interest together, look out. Plus, you add in arrogance, and there's plenty of arrogance at ESPN.
It's prominent at ESPN, and it's to me, it's refreshing that he's probably an old news kind of a guy who actually believes in reporting on the story as opposed to rereading what the Louis Free press release said and creating disaster in the lives of good human beings as a result. The other story was this Lunenburg High School case, and I'll summarize it for folks who haven't heard about it, though I don't know how you haven't heard about it. It's been on the Today Show and every place else, and again, reported incorrectly. Isaac Phillips is a football player. They're a freshman on the freshman team, and his mother made accusations that he was the target of racism and racial slurs by teammates who had spray painted her house with a racial slur that said Knights, and that's the name of the team, don't need N-words. Now, this got all kinds of, oh my gods, from the Today Show, Matt Lauer kind of people. Oh, how can it be? Well, here's how it can be, because you didn't investigate it. And it turns out now that after the police actually have been investigating it, they believe her to have made false statements and that she may well have spray painted her own house. And,
by the way, the football team's season got ended in disgrace.
Yes.
Because of this. And if you look deeper into the story, and see that, well, let me finish this part first, and then I'll give you the big picture. If you look deeper in the story, the referee of the game where the original episode took place says that there was no racial incident. And that's, by the way, why the graffiti was taken seriously. So in all these stories, you need to follow the evolution of the story, right? To look at it logically. I know logic is hardly ever used anymore.
No, it's in short demand in the media.
Right, exactly. But so the referee says, wait a minute, the snowball as it started down this little mountain was illegitimate to begin with. And then the other part of the story that made no sense, and I read that story at the time, Kevin, and my BS detector went off, almost full blast. Because, there's been many, many hate crime hoaxes over the years, but this one made no sense at all either, because the kid wasn't even on the team.
Right.
Okay? And so
he's on the freshman team.
Right. He's on freshman. Who the hell cares enough about a freshman football player to put racist graffiti on a garage? Yeah. It just doesn't make any damn sense. And so then the big picture, why is it? I get the incompetence competence. I get wanting to, this great narrative of, because the media thinks every white person is racist, right? So
that's right.
That helps. They love that narrative, and
they love it.
And they love the football narrative. But why is it that they can't smell? Do they have no sense of smell for bull crap at all?
No, because they're so full of bull crap that they think it's normal, that scent.
Well, but you know what? That might be the most important thing said during this entire interview. I agree with that. That's a very good analysis. But I guess what is so striking in this particular case is, and I wish this is what your listeners would take away from all this. What I tell people, what I've learned from the Penn State case and the Steubenville case, and this Massachusetts case, another great example. If a narrative being spun by the media doesn't make total sense, and it fits with their agenda, and they're all saying the same thing, it's false. I mean, period. I mean, in every case,
without fail.
Without fail.
John, here in this Lunenburg case, this is a football team. Once again, the other element that the media loves to have in there is a football team, because we can always blame the jock culture, which really doesn't exist to a dangerous degree in most places. Let's blame the football team, because that's easy. Everybody will say, those damn athletes, they get everything handed to them, and now look what they're doing. They're running around undisciplined. The investigators have exonerated the football team, whose season was canceled by a bunch of administrators who went on a witch hunt after the football team. They're the victims.
No, absolutely, and I love the part of the story where the football team was actually outside the home of the woman as they served the search warrant on her. So clearly, if you read between the lines, this was a situation where the people in the town knew something was wrong, right? I mean, they just doesn't make any sense. And so these kids, and this is what I guess there's so many elements of this, Kevin, that drive me bananas. But so much of this is being done under the supposed intentions of, well, we're just trying to protect the kids, right? This is all for the kids, right? Well, who's getting hurt the most?
The kids.
Penn State, it's the kids that were on the football team that had absolutely nothing to do with Jerry Sandusky, and so their careers get screwed, all right? Steubenville, the kids on the football team, they got to the state semifinals this year beyond all, against all odds whatsoever. They go on this incredible run. They're in the state semifinals, and that week the Attorney General files bogus indictments that have nothing to do with them, completely overshadowing their entire season, and then they get their asses kicked that week, which I guarantee was not coincidental. And now here we have a situation where these kids in Massachusetts have their entire football season ruined, their rivalry game and their playoffs expunged because of a hoax.
And we could go right on to the Duke lacrosse story, which was a joke from the beginning. I mean, I remember going on the air saying, you better watch out on this case, because it's going to prove to not be true. And people said, oh, how can you say that? These spoiled, rotten, rich kids who play lacrosse at Duke, they're guilty. Really? By the way, now that girl who accused them of sexual assault is charged with murder. And Jesse Jackson was going to pay for her college education. I wonder how that went. And the prosecutor in that area was disbarred because he held back exculpatory evidence. For those who aren't lawyers, exculpatory means evidence that will exonerate the people that are charged. He knowingly held it back. But yet that gets so little coverage. And here's a good one for you. Just this weekend, here's a story that they should be all over about an athletic team getting entitlements. The Florida basketball team is leaving Gainesville to go play a game in Connecticut. Guess who's going to televise the game, by the way? ESPN. Right. The Florida basketball team's plane has a mechanical problem. What do? Do they take another plane and wait for it? No. Right. Delta bumps normal passengers off of their flight coming home on Thanksgiving weekend so that the Florida Gators can hop on a plane and go up to Connecticut and play on ESPN. Was that reported on ESPN? Absolutely not.
Well, and of course that also then leads us to the Winston case at Florida State, which I think is interesting because it relates to the three cases that we've been talking about in a couple of important ways. I think that the Penn State, the Steubenville, and now this Massachusetts case what's driving them in the media is the power of two words, which makes people's heads explode: rape and racism.
Yep.
And here we have a situation in the Winston case in Florida State where we have rape, but we also have the other R word, racism, because he's black, and because of the fact that he's potentially leading a national championship team and could win the Heisman Trophy. So the media is completely conflicted. It's almost like they don't know which way to go on this because, wait a minute, he's black, so we don't want to be accused of being racist if we're wrong. In the Duke case, there was no worry about that because they're white privileged lacrosse players, right?
Right.
So if we're wrong, screw it. Oh well.
Yeah, who cares?
Who cares? We sided with the right person because it was a black female who claimed rape. So
a black whore is what it was.
Right. Well,
so the media, the national media in this country, sided with a black whore. That's beautiful.
Yeah, who ended up being a murderer.
Right.
But,
or at least charged with it.
But Kevin, what can you do? Everybody makes mistakes, right?
Yeah, and you're exactly right in this Winston case, John, because if that were A.J. McCarron at Alabama being investigated, can you imagine?
Oh, if Catherine Webb had accused A.J. McCarron of raping her, oh my God. I mean, Tim Tebow wouldn't be able to get on television. It's just unbelievable. The hypocrisy and the double standard here is extraordinary. I don't know, by the way, whether Winston is guilty, and I don't think you do.
Nope.
But the reality is the double standard is what we're exposing here. Wait a minute, guys. I mean, you already, in other cases, at similar circumstances, you rushed to judgment, you destroyed lives, and you were all over it. Now, what I find amazing in the Winston coverage, Kevin, I don't know if you've seen the same thing, is it's almost like the coverage is completely butt-covering coverage.
Right.
What I mean by that is they'll do it for 45 seconds. There's no intensity. Their heart's not in it. There's no venom for it. It's just like, oh, by the way, this is going on. We'll keep an eye on it.
And they'll almost apologize for having said it.
Oh yeah. They almost apologize. You're right. It feels as if they're almost apologizing that we have to cover
right
because there is a black quarterback for a number one ranked team who might get charged with rape any day now. I mean, it's really quite stunning what's happened here, and I think that the number one, people say to me all the time, well, why? Well, the number one thing that's changed in the news media is that because of the internet and because of the explosion of cable news networks and 1,000 different TV stations, fragmentation and technology have created circumstances where now what you do in the next 15 minutes is all that matters. And once that 15 minutes in the media is up, you don't care about it anymore because you're on to the next story.
Right.
It's all you got to feed the monster every second of every day, and you got to do it in the way that gets you the best ratings, the best internet traffic. And by the way, we know what that internet traffic is almost instantaneously. We know what the overnight TV ratings are to the minute. There's no getting around it anymore. There's no human judgment. There's no news judgment. It is all based upon actual real numbers. And so the tail is wagging the dog. And you also have a bunch of people who are stupid, incompetent, narcissistic, and don't care. They don't care about ethics or anything having to do with the truth. The truth is irrelevant to this. And we've seen it time and time again. And I really hope that your listeners and other people who are exposed to these stories will start to see the connections. It's not just that football is being attacked, which I believe it is being attacked, but I think every time you understand one of these stories, the next one becomes more easily understood because it's the same stuff driving each of them. And so, to me, that's one of the reasons why I've tried to make so much about the Steubenville story, because I think Steubenville proves Penn State was bull crap because they were directly connected. In fact, I'm positive that the media, basically Steubenville was the media's sequel to Penn State. And there's almost no doubt about it. It's all based on bull crap, and people ought to know what the truth is.
And in this case with Jameis Winston, I don't know if the girl's white or black who's made the accusations. I have no idea. Because this is another thing, but this is for another day. This is a legal thing that bothers me to no end. That the alleged victim, her identity is always kept secret, but the alleged perpetrator can be smeared all over every television news screen or newspaper within a satellite's reach and could very well be innocent. We don't know.
That's a great point. I've been baffled in the Penn State case, and as you know, I've dealt with this directly, and I've been tarred and feathered for this. I mean, the way the victims in the Sandusky case have been treated is truly bizarre, because even in certain situations where some of them have actually made their own names public,
right,
even then the media still protects their identity, and to a way that I believe has been incredibly corrosive and destructive to trying to get to the truth of this matter, including the Key McQueary victim. I mean, the Key McQueary victim, I believe the entire case against Penn State is based upon this particular victim, who I've said time and time again has only made one statement on this case, and that is that nothing happened that night or any night with Jerry Sandusky, and he's positive McQueary is not telling the truth. This person made his name known publicly in letters to the editor, and the Today Show would not wouldn't let me say his name. They had lawyers breathing down my neck, literally like referees looking into the replay booth, to make sure that I never even referenced anything that would allow someone to find this person's name on the internet. I mean, that's how insane it is. And again, I believe this person's telling the truth. This is a person who is saying he was not sexually abused. So the double standards, the hypocrisy are all over the place here, and I do think it all gets down to these two words that make people's brains explode: rape and racism. And I understand why people get upset about those two words. They're very powerful words. Unfortunately, I think the media has now used both of those words for their own purposes, and I think it's a travesty, and it's not helping anybody.
They not only use them for their own purposes, but they pay such little respect to either word anymore that, and so what I'm saying is, when it's a true rape or true racism, we're numb to it because the media has inundated us with this.
Bingo.
Where it's not true.
I agree with that 1,000%. Is very wise what you just said there. In a pretend, and that's what they're doing. They're pretending. These media people are actors. In pretending to be all outraged about anything dealing with rape or racism, they've actually gone against what they claim to be for, which is they have diluted the power of those two words to a degree to where I think a lot of people are immune to it and desensitized to it, but they don't care.
No, they don't care.
Whatever good for them. Whatever good for them.
As long as they can get ratings and generate revenue, they don't care. And they don't want to hear it, by the way. And I'll continually go back to your appearance on that joke limey from England, Piers Morgan, who ought to be taken out and tarred and feathered after the way he treated you on TV. But this is a guy who doesn't want to hear it because you didn't agree with him. Well,
yeah, he is a guy who clearly is all about whatever helps him keep his gig. I mean, these people are ego. They need to understand just how egomaniacal most of the media people are, and how difficult once you lose your gig. I mean, these people, when they lose their gigs, they lose their entire sense of personhood. So gigs are very difficult to come by, good gigs in the media, especially in this day and age. And so they're not going to do anything that can possibly threaten that. That's why courage is non-existent. I mean, there is no real journalism or investigative journalism, because you got to take chances and risks, and therefore you might risk your gig, and no one's going to do that. And so Piers Morgan is a jackass. I mean, he was actually worse off the air than he was on the air. That's hard to believe.
That's hard to believe.
But people can see that video. It's pretty entertaining at our website, www.framingpaterno.com.
I can't imagine that you were able to control yourself and not leap over the damn table and go at him. Hey, John.
I wish I had, actually.
Yeah. We're out of time, but great stuff, man. Always fantastic to visit with you, but great stuff today.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Sean. That's Sean Ziegler visiting with us from framingpaterno.com, where you can see those stories and so much more. That is the definitive source to go to if you really want the actual truth as to what's going on in the Paterno case, I shouldn't even call it that. That's a disrespect to Joe Paterno. In the Penn State case that involves Joe Paterno, in which he wasn't involved. There, that's a better way to describe it. John has done the yeoman's work. I've done a lot of work on it, and together we share the same feeling about the way it was handled, mishandled, and reported, and investigated. And the facts back us. They do not back the liberal media that simply wants to steal money by accusing and carrying on a false narrative on someone else's career and life and legacy. It's disgraceful. It's despicable. If you believe anything the media tells you, you should be put in a nut house. We'll be back with more right after this.